What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And today I got for you my 7 players that I just can't stop drafting in fantasy football so far this season. All this information and data you're going to see today in regards to ADP and rankings is coming straight off of Underdog Fantasy and all their best ball tournaments they got going on, whether that be Best Ball Mania or their cheaper $3 to $5 drafts. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. The first player that I absolutely cannot stop drafting so far this year is Achane. I absolutely love Achane, and more importantly, I love where he's being selected in drafts. He's going in that second to third round where it's very chalky and there's a clear tier drop-off after the first round. And more importantly, I love drafting him there because I feel like he's the one guy who truly separates himself from the rest of the pack as being different. I believe he is the one guy in that range who truly has that elite, game-wrecking, week-to-week fantasy upside that those other guys don't have. And I know everybody's talking about Achane right now, and that's for great reason. He's lightning in a bottle, he's explosive, he's dynamic, he's electric, and just some stats to show you that. Out of all qualifying running backs with at least 100 carries last season, he ranked first in EPA per rush, first in success rate, first in yards after contact, first in explosive run rate, and first in yards created. This is clearly an elite player who also happens to be in an elite situation on an elite offense, where unfortunately for defenses, they can't fully game plan and plan to stop him due to the speed and dynamic wide receivers they have on the outside in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. We can also expect an expanded role in total this year in terms of workload and total volume compared to last year, coming into his second season in the NFL and his second year in this Mike McDaniel offense. Also, we can expect an expanded role in the pass game. He's a very good pass catcher. He's a very good route runner. And Mike McDaniel and this offensive staff have already come out and stated that they want to get him more involved in the receiving game. And that's huge for his fantasy upside every single week. Anytime that a running back as dynamic and explosive as Achane can get any more touches, that's more potential for him to just break a 40-yard, 50-yard, 60-yard, 70-yard play of the house, and that's just more fantasy points for us. And I know people are worried about the potential of injury due to his size, and I totally understand it. You're not sure if a running back that small can truly be as durable as he needs to be in today's NFL, and I'm totally there with you. I totally understand it. However, he provides us with such elite fantasy ceiling weeks that I am undeniably willing to take that chance just because those are the exact type of guys I want to chase in this format. Guys who can just go out and give you those 40, 50-plus point weeks any given Sunday. So, yeah, I absolutely love Achane this year. And due to his fact that he can go out and give you those gigantic weeks, it wouldn't surprise me that if close to the end of the summer, we start seeing him rise up into the early second round. Maybe some people start taking him at the 1-2 turn. Going on to my second player, I have DeVonta Smith. And this might be my first and biggest flag plant so far on the channel this year, and that's mainly just because I absolutely love the situation that DeVonta Smith is heading into in 2024. Also, he's one of those guys who's also going in that dead zone of that second/third round where a lot of those guys are the same. So in that area, I'm really looking to target great players on elite offenses that are going to score a lot of points, and DeVonta Smith is just that. However, the main reason I'm really excited for DeVonta Smith this season is the addition of Kellen Moore and what it means for DeVonta Smith's role in this offense. Kellen Moore is bringing a philosophy of using motion that the Philadelphia Eagles have not seen since DeVonta Smith has been in the league. Last year, the Philadelphia Eagles were 30th in pre-snap motion. And last year, the Los Angeles Chargers were 5th in pre-snap motion. So that's a huge addition to this offense that the Eagles wide receiver, specifically DeVonta Smith, hasn't had the luxury of playing in yet. And you might be asking why that is such a big deal in terms of pre-snap motion. Well, Kellen Moore uses pre-snap motion to produce these easy layup throws for wide receivers that create easy catches and easy yardage for them, specifically his slot receivers. And ironically, the reason I am so excited about DeVonta Smith is that I believe he profiles extremely similar to the last 2 slot wide receivers that Kellen Moore used in this role in CeeDee Lamb and Keenan Allen. 2022, CeeDee Lamb led the NFL with 87 PPR points as the pre-snap motion man. In 2023, Keenan Allen, in just 13 games, mind you, led the NFL with 105 PPR points as the pre-snap motion man. So as I said, Kellen Moore loves to create these mismatches in easy completions and yards for his slot receivers with pre-snap motion. Also, Kellen Moore loves to use motion in the red zone and loves to use his slot receivers in the end zone. last season, Keenan Allen was 5th in the entire NFL in red zone targets. And like I said before, that's just in 13 games. So that just alludes to the point that he absolutely loves getting his slot receivers in motion on the red zone and getting them easy targets and easy looks. And you might be wondering why I believe that DeVonta Smith profiles so much better into this role than perhaps A.J. Brown or anybody else on the Eagles roster. Well, since both of those guys were Eagles together the last 2 seasons, DeVonta Smith has been much better and more productive with his slot snaps than A.J. Brown, recording 500 more yards and 3 more touchdowns when lined up in the slot than A.J. Brown. And if we just take a look at this depth chart behind A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith, it's Paris Campbell and then 2 rookies in Anaya Smith and Johnny Wilson. Paris Campbell's a guy to me that also doesn't profile well for this get open early and often slot role. He profiles to me as more of a flanker who's going to be used as a vertical separator and somebody used in the screen game. Anaya Smith to me is also not a guy who profiles very well for this get open early and often slot role. I believe Anaya Smith is going to be their tried and true manufactured touch guy, whether that's designed screen passes, designed RPO bubbles to get to him, or just straight up manufactured backfield touches. And then Johnny Wilson, of course, isn't that guy. He's just a pure outside wide receiver who's going to be A.J. Brown's primary backup, in my opinion. And then you might be wondering about A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is that dominant X receiver who's going to be lined up on the line of scrimmage for a majority of his snaps and be asked to frequently beat press man coverage, which we've seen him do over the years constantly. He's the best receiver in the NFL when facing press man coverage since coming into the league. And I'm not saying that A.J. Brown won't ever get slot snaps. Of course he will. He will be lined up in the slot. However, DeVonta Smith is the guy who is going to be the primary slot receiver on this offense, and I think he's going to be the main benefactor of this Kellen Moore offense and how Kellen Moore uses his slot receivers. So I love DeVonta Smith this year. I'm fully expecting a career high in receptions, yards, and even touchdowns for him. I think he's an absolute home run play at the back end of the second and early third. Moving on to number 3, I have Rome Odunze. This is a guy who is one of the most talented wide receiver prospects we've ever seen. Unfortunately, he's being overshadowed for a few reasons. And the first reason is that he was the 3rd wide receiver off the draft this year in a historic wide receiver class behind Marvin Harrison Jr., the best wide receiver prospect since Jamar Chase, and then Malik Neighbors, who also would have been the best wide receiver prospect since Jamar Chase. But if we just take a look at Rome Odunze's reception perception profile, it might be the best we've ever seen for a wide receiver prospect, being green in every single route. And Matt Harmon himself compared Rome Odunze to Devontae Adams, where there's just simply no weakness in his game. And I know everybody's also freaking out about Keenan Allen, but who's to say that Rome Odunze isn't the 2nd most talented wide receiver day 1 in Chicago? If we're just being real for a second, the Chicago Bears barely have an investment into Keenan Allen this season. They only used a 4th-round pick to acquire him. Meanwhile, on the other hand, they used a top 9 selection to draft Rome Odunze. I would just be very shocked if the rookie, who was a top 10 selection, was held off the field the entire season by a 33-year-old slot receiver that the team has minimal investment in. And also, speaking about the slot receiver role, I think that's very important to mention because Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze are 2 very different players who will be playing 2 very different roles in 2024. Keenan Allen's not really a guy you want to have lined up out wide at this stage of his career, so he will be mostly playing the slot, if not entirely the slot, in 2024, which really shouldn't have that much of an impact on Rome Odunze due to the fact that he is a pure X wide receiver who, just like A.J. Brown, is going to line up on the line of scrimmage and be asked to successfully beat press man coverage. However, I think he could be a guy who plays all 3 roles, and honestly, all that does is open up more snaps for Rome Odunze, if we're being totally honest here. Because the more you can do, the more you're going to be on the field. And maybe early on in the season, they ease Rome in. But by mid-season, I can see a world where he is the clear number 2 in this offense who gets a massive amount of the snaps and kicks Keenan Allen off the field entirely in 2 wide receiver sets. I really don't think that's a stretch to say. I also just really want parts of offenses that I think are going to be really good. And I personally believe that this Bears offense is going to be fantastic, and you're getting a major discount on a top 10 pick and a great offense with a great supporting cast, all because he was a 3rd wide receiver drafted in this draft and because they acquired a 33-year-old slot receiver. So I'm taking advantage of Rome Odunze's price. I'm taking advantage of his ADP, and I'm snagging him as much as I can before training camp starts and ultimately preseason starts because I think he's a fantastic player and he's going to be a fantastic value at ADP. Moving on, I have David Montgomery, a guy who's currently going off the board as RB17 and 75th overall on Underdog Fantasy. He's just one of my absolute favorite running back targets because he's just such a rock-solid selection where you know exactly what you're going to get. And I absolutely love him in these 0 RB builds because of that reason. He remains in the same exact situation as last year, in an elite offense projected to score the second most points in the NFL, with arguably the best O-line in the entire NFL. He will still see the absolute bulk of the carries compared to Jahmyr Gibbs in 2024. Of course, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to see more work overall because of his contributions in the pass game and how we can project him to take a bigger step in that department this season. However, I still believe that when it's all said and done, the carry share will significantly favor David Montgomery by the end of the season. And going back to last year, if we just look at the final 8 games when Montgomery came back from injury, the carry shares in the offense for the Lions was 48% to Monty and 42% to Gibbs. And personally, I believe that's the worst case scenario for Montgomery this season if he remains healthy. Also, David Montgomery is the better goal line back, so the touchdown upside will remain there this season, just as it was last season before he got hurt and even after he got hurt. And touching on that further, if we just look at the last 2 seasons with this Lions offense, Jamal Williams led the league in rushing touchdowns in 2022 with 17. David Montgomery last year was 3rd in the NFL with 13 while missing 3 games, and Jahmyr Gibbs still punching in 10 rushing scores himself. So there's clear touchdown upside that still remains in this offense, that still remains there. I've seen a lot of people talking about touchdown regression for David Montgomery in a negative way, and I'm not sure I'm there yet, considering this is projected to be the second best offense in football this year. They're going to have to score some way, and as we've seen the last 2 years, they absolutely love running the ball in the red zone, and David Montgomery is going to be the main running back to do it. Also, just the selection of RBs being drafted around him are all either worse players, older players, or players in much worse situations. For example, some guys, Aaron Jones, he's 29 years old. Ramondre Stevenson remains on one of the worst offenses in all of football. Najee Harris is seeing an improved situation this season, but it's still not the Detroit Lions. Zamir White, we have no idea what Zamir White is, and he's on one of the worst offenses in football. Jonathan Brooks, arguably the worst offense in football. And Jalen Warren, a backup running back who I just can't ever see me taking ever over David Montgomery. So yeah, I absolutely love Monty. I think he's just one of the best values because he's one of those guys who's going to give you production week in and week out regardless. Moving on, I have Jake Ferguson. I absolutely love Jake Ferguson, and I think the sky's the limit this year. This is a guy who we saw break out last year, his way to a Pro Bowl nod, and I expect an even bigger year in 2024 for him. In 2023, Jake Ferguson was 16th in target share amongst all tight ends. However, he was 9th in receptions, 8th in receiving yards, top 6 in yards after the catch, and top 10 in fantasy points per game. I think in 2024, his target share will only go up in an offense that added absolutely no weapons for him at the wide receiver position or tight end position to compete with, and they have absolutely no run game, so to speak, to rely on either this season. So they're going to need to pass the ball at a high rate similar to what they did last year post-bye week. I also think a huge point that a lot of people haven't realized yet is we can expect some positive red zone and touchdown regression for Jake Ferguson this season. Ferguson in 2023 was a guy who ranked 2nd in the entire NFL in red zone targets, yet only had 5 touchdowns. Compare that to his teammate, Brandon Cooks, for example, who had 7 red zone targets last year, yet had 8 touchdowns. Would it surprise you if those two just swapped touchdowns and we're looking at an 8-touchdown year for Jake Ferguson? Wouldn't surprise me one bit. Also, speaking on Brandon Cooks more, he's another year older. Who's to say he doesn't lose another step this year? He's clearly not the same player he was 2-3 years ago, but who's to say he's not even the same player this year that he was last year? That would leave even more potential target volume for Jake Ferguson in this offense. This will also be year 2 as a starter in this offense with Dak Prescott, so there's going to be much more familiarity and chemistry between the two than there was last year, and also he's going to be on the field all the time. He's going to run a ton of routes. They don't ask him to pass block much, and he's going to command a ton of targets in this offense that we expect to throw the ball a ton and score a ton of points. So give me all the Jake Ferguson I can get this year. I think he's a great value at current cost, and more importantly, I think he's an awesome value at current cost because he's very easy to stack Dak Prescott with right now. So that's one of my favorite stacks in these best ball tournaments. And yeah, I love that pairing, and I absolutely love Jake Ferguson this season. Moving on, I have Jerome Ford going off the board as running back 41. And I believe there's absolutely no way he doesn't live up to that current ADP. As we know it right now, he will be the starting running back to at least start the season, if not for the majority of the season, and maybe even potentially the entirety of the season, depending on Nick Chubb and his health. Last year, he was running back 25 in fantasy points per game, and that was while sharing the field with Chubb for a few games until becoming the starter once Chubb got hurt. That production was also while the Browns' entire O-line, for the most part, got hurt, and they were dealing with a major carousel of quarterbacks. And if you look at this Browns roster and you look at this Browns running back depth chart, they really added nobody besides D'Onta Foreman, who I don't view as any type of real threat to Jerome Ford and his starting job and overall workload. And then I believe Jerome Ford is a guy who will retain value once Nick Chubb comes back due to his work in the pass game and being an upgrade in that department over Nick Chubb. And getting deeper into Nick Chubb, let's say that he just does come back much earlier than expected. What does Chubb's workload really look like? I doubt it'll be significant in any sort of way at all. He's 28 years old, coming off his second catastrophic knee injury to the same exact knee, so there's no chance in 2024 that he will ever touch the volume that he was getting in 2023 pre-injury, which gives Ford standalone value this season and for the entirety of the season in an offense that we project to be better this season with a healthy O-line, a healthy Deshaun Watson. They go out and make improvements to their wide receiver core, bringing in Jerry Jeudy. They go out and they add Ken Dorsey as their OC, and I believe that is a huge factor in this offense this year. While I know this offense is still going to be Kevin Stefanski's offense and his scheme, and he's going to be calling the plays, the Ken Dorsey hire shows me a lot. Ken Dorsey's offenses are a lot more pass-heavy, shotgun-based approaches that fit Deshaun Watson's game a lot more than what we've seen from Kevin Stefanski offenses back when he was an offensive coordinator in his time as a head coach in Cleveland. And ironically, I believe that Ken Dorsey's offense fits Jerome Ford much better than it fits Nick Chubb. While the move was certainly made for Deshaun Watson and to get fresh ideas in the building to maximize Deshaun Watson in 2024, I believe it also directly correlates and positively affects Jerome Ford as well. And at his current ADP, he's going behind guys like Devin Singletary and Zeke in more guys in worse or much more murky situations than Ford, and I just can't ever see myself drafting those guys over Ford. Specifically, those two guys, Devin Singletary and Zeke. Devin Singletary is a guy who's going to be on one of the absolute worst offenses of all of football with one of the absolute worst O-lines. So what is his ceiling? 15 for 56 every week? That's not a guy I really want to chase in these best ball formats. I really believe he doesn't give you any week-to-week upside whatsoever. Zeke is a guy who I totally understand that he has value in best ball this season due to the fact that I believe he is going to be the pure goal line back for the Dallas Cowboys, and there's times where he's going to fall into the end zone 2-3 times a game. However, I just think Jerome Ford as the starting running back in this Browns offense is much more valuable than the 2 or 3 spike weeks that Ezekiel Elliott might give you this season. Moving on, Jermaine Burton, my absolute favorite late round wide receiver currently, going off the board as wide receiver 70 and 150th overall. I would just much rather have Jermaine Burton over the guys he's going around like Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall, Quentin Johnston, and Darnell Mooney. Jermaine Burton is an explosive big play threat who just had an absolutely outrageous 20.2 ADOT his final season in college while also not dropping a single pass. And that was in a pretty horrific passing offense at Alabama. He was also a guy who ranked out extremely high in Matt Harmon's reception perception, being top 3 in the class in both success rates versus man coverage with a 75% success rate and 77.3 success rate versus press coverage. So a very smooth and easy separator and a guy who clearly has the ability to beat press coverage as well. This is a player here, if it weren't for his off-the-field concerns, we're more than likely talking about him as a late first round, early second round wide receiver. And then he falls in the draft and gets drafted into a fantastic situation with an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow and an elite offense with the Cincinnati Bengals. And his role in this offense is going to be clear, in my opinion. The Cincinnati Bengals were 7th in the entire NFL in 3 wide receiver set usage, and that's very important when you look at the departure of Tyler Boyd. That opens up an instant role for Burton to step into without really any legitimate competition that should worry you behind him. I also think it's very interesting because not only does Burton have inside-outside versatility, but he's a guy who's very different from Tyler Boyd. So his skill set and what he brings to the table in terms of this offense is clearly something that Zach Taylor and the Cincinnati Bengals felt their offense was missing in a major way. we also have to factor in the T. Higgins situation, right? Like, not only is he a guy who we don't expect to be on the Bengals next season, he's also a player who's missed 2 and 5 games in 2 seasons the last 3 years, and has also been banged up in multiple games, resulting in him leaving those games early. So there's a chance we see some games with Jermaine Burton as the number 2 option in this passing attack. And so, yeah, I absolutely love Jermaine Burton. He's a smash buy at his current price right now. I can see a world where he significantly outproduces his ADP this season. So yeah, those are the 7 guys I can't stop drafting. I absolutely love all those guys and their current cost for different reasons, as I explained in this video. And my next one, I'm going to be bringing you the guys that I just absolutely can't bring myself to draft, guys that I absolutely hate drafting at their current prices. So if you guys like, please consider commenting, and subscribing, and I'll be back with another one soon. Thanks, guys.